Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we're going to expose something that's hiding in plain sight. Something so common that everyone assumes it can't possibly be the root of disaster, and yet it is. You're about to look into the mirror of your relationships. What you see might shock you, because the one thing that destroys every relationship isn't the dramatic crash, it's the quiet erosion. It's the moment you decide to stay silent instead of speaking up. The moment you convince yourself, it's fine, I'll deal with it later. That's the moment the rot begins, and if you think that doesn't apply to me, you're exactly why we're here, because this destroyer doesn't shout. It creeps, it lodges itself in innocence, in ignorance, in comfortable habits. It's blind and it's fatal. So if you're ready to build relationships that last, relationships that reflect your highest self, then lean in. Because this may change how you relate, how you communicate, how you connect. Silence looks harmless. It looks peaceful. From the outside, it even looks mature. Two people avoiding conflict, keeping things calm, letting the moment pass. But inside a relationship, silence is the quietest killer you will ever face, because silence doesn't enter like an enemy, it enters like a friend. It convinces you that avoiding the hard conversation is better than risking tension. It tells you that swallowing your feelings is the noble thing to do. It makes you believe that if you just stay quiet long enough, somehow the problem will solve itself, but it never does. Silence within connection is not peace. It is decay in slow motion. When you stop speaking your truth, the relationship doesn't stay the same, it starts drifting. And the dangerous part is, the drift is barely noticeable at first. It's a small shift in energy. A slight distance, a moment where you start thinking twice before sharing what you feel, and you convince yourself it's no big deal, but that tiny emotional hesitation is where the breakdown begins, because connection lives in communication. It breathes through honesty. When honesty dies, connection suffocates. Think about it. Every strong relationship is built on the ability to say the uncomfortable thing, to ask the hard question, to reveal what's really going on inside. When you take that away, not because you don't care, but because you're scared of what might happen, you disconnect yourself from the very thing you're trying to protect. You become two people living side by side, but not moving heart to heart. And the tragedy is, most people don't notice until the gap is wide enough to feel permanent. Silence grows like roots underground. You don't see them, but they're spreading. That unspoken frustration, that unanswered doubt, that unmet need you keep burying, all of it is building a weight inside you. And eventually it turns into resentment. Resentment isn't born from major betrayals. It's born from minor truths left unspoken. It's born from the moments you needed to be understood but chose to endure. From the times you felt something shifting but pretended everything was fine. Resentment doesn't appear in a single moment. It builds from every moment you stayed silent. You start telling yourself that the other person doesn't care, that they don't notice, that they don't ask. But the truth is, they don't know what you never said, and you begin to feel alone even while standing right beside them. That kind of loneliness, the kind that exists inside a relationship, cuts deeper than any solitude you feel alone. Because at least when you're alone physically, you know why you feel disconnected. But when you're silent in a relationship, the disconnect becomes a mystery. You start questioning everything, and the other person starts sensing the distance without understanding where it came from. This is why silence is so dangerous. It creates invisible wounds that both people feel but neither can name, and without communication, those wounds turn into assumptions. Assumptions turn into stories. Stories turn into beliefs, and beliefs turn into decisions. Decisions that often end relationships long before anyone realizes the root cause was a conversation that never happened. You might think you're protecting the relationship by avoiding conflict, but what you're actually doing is avoiding clarity, and clarity is what keeps relationships alive. Without clarity, you operate in confusion. Confusion breeds emotional insecurity. Insecurity creates fear. Fear makes you hide even more, and the cycle continues. What most people don't understand is this: honesty doesn't break relationships. Truth doesn't push people away. What breaks relationships is the lack of it. People fall out of alignment before they fall out of love. And alignment requires communication, real communication, the kind that exposes you, reveals you, challenges you, and ultimately strengthens you. The kind that requires courage. Silence feels safer because it demands nothing from you. It doesn't require vulnerability. It doesn't require standing your ground. It doesn't require expressing what hurts or what matters. But anything that requires no effort will also bring no depth. And depth is the lifeline of real connection. When you speak up, you risk discomfort. When you stay silent, you risk the relationship, and the cost of silence is always greater. Because you might avoid a temporary argument, but you create a permanent distance. You might avoid hurting feelings today, but you guarantee emotional numbness tomorrow. There is no version of a strong relationship where silence is the foundation. The real test of connection is whether you can tell the truth when it's difficult, not just when it's convenient. Whether you can say, "This bothered me, I need this, I'm scared, or I don't feel connected." Whether you can show what's real instead of pretending everything is fine. Pretending destroys what honesty could fix. If you want a relationship that lasts, you have to kill silence before silence kills connection. You have to choose courage over comfort, truth over tension, voice over fear. Because the moment you stop speaking your truth is the moment you stop being truly connected, and once connection fades, nothing else, no history, no moments, no promises, can hold it together. Speak before the silence speaks for you. It's never the dramatic moments that break a relationship first. It's never the explosion, the betrayal, or the final argument. Those are just the symptoms. The real damage starts long before that, in the quiet spaces no one pays attention to, in the little moments that seem too small to matter. Because relationships don't collapse in one night. They erode over time, and the erosion begins with the things you look at and think it's nothing. But it's always the small, unattended moments that silently widen the gap. You ignore the slight change in tone, you shrug off the uneasy feeling, you overlook the moment when connection feels a little bit off. You tell yourself you're tired, they're tired, and it'll all be fine tomorrow. But every time you dismiss one of those moments, something subtle shifts, something small slips out of alignment, and if you don't address it, that small shift becomes the beginning of emotional distance. People think relationships break because of big mistakes, but the truth is, big mistakes only land where small disconnects have already been growing. When two people stop paying attention to the little signs, they stop nurturing the bond. And when the bond weakens, the relationship becomes vulnerable, vulnerable to misunderstanding, vulnerable to resentment, vulnerable to assumptions, vulnerable to everything a strong connection would normally survive. Think about how a crack forms in a wall. It doesn't happen from the final break. It starts with a tiny fracture you don't notice, and because you don't notice it, you don't fix it. Over time, pressure, weight, and neglect expand that fracture. The wall eventually breaks, not because of one sudden impact, but because no one cared enough to repair the first tiny crack. Relationships work the same way. A missed "how are you really?" a forgotten appreciation. A moment when someone needed reassurance and you were too distracted to give it. A disagreement brushed aside rather than resolved. None of these moments are dramatic. None of them seem big. They're small enough that you convince yourself they don't matter. But they do. They matter because connection thrives on presence, attention, and intention. When you stop showing up in the small moments, you stop feeding the connection, and then you wonder why it feels weaker, why the bond feels different, why the energy isn't what it used to be. The human heart is sensitive. It doesn't break from one heavy blow, it breaks from repeated neglect, even when that neglect isn't malicious. When you let the little moments go unattended, what you're actually doing is teaching each other that the relationship is no longer the priority it once was, not intentionally, but gradually, and gradual damage is the most dangerous because it's invisible until it's too late. You start talking less, you start sharing less, you start assuming instead of asking. You start tolerating instead of understanding. The emotional gap widens 1 inch at a time. By the time the explosion happens, by the time the big problem shows up, the distance is so wide that the relationship can't withstand the impact. But that impact was only possible because the little things were ignored. No relationship fails suddenly. It fails slowly, quietly, unnoticed. The irony is, small moments also have the power to strengthen relationships more than grand gestures ever could. A sincere check-in, a soft "I heard you," a moment of patience when you're frustrated. A small thank you that reminds someone they're valued. These little acts deepen connection the same way neglect weakens it. The difference is whether you choose to engage or ignore. It takes awareness to notice the micro moments. It takes maturity to address them. It takes courage to say, "Something felt off, can we talk about it?" But that courage is what protects connection. That awareness is what prevents cracks from becoming collapses. And that maturity is what builds relationships that last, not just relationships that look good on the surface. People who maintain deep, healthy relationships aren't perfect, they're attentive. They don't wait for big problems to fix things, they invest in the small ones before they grow. They don't let emotions pile up until they overflow. They don't avoid uncomfortable moments. They confront them early before they turn into something irreversible. The truth is, the strength of a relationship is determined by how you treat the little moments. Because small moments are where trust is built, where love is shown, where understanding deepens. And the same small moments, if unattended, are where love begins to fade without anyone noticing. If you want a relationship that lasts, pay attention to the quiet shifts. Listen to what isn't said, ask about the small things, be present in the seemingly insignificant moments, because the big failures only happen when the little moments are ignored. Care for the small things now, or you will face the big things later. You must fight the mindset of it happens to them, not me. That sentence is the slow poison that destroys accountability, blinds you to reality, and weakens every relationship you're in. The moment you convince yourself that you're the exception, that the problems you see in other people's relationships could never touch yours, you've already stepped onto dangerous ground. Because nothing protects you less than the belief that you're safe from the very things you refuse to confront. People love the illusion that their relationship is different, stronger, unbreakable, immune. They look at others who drift apart, who fall into misunderstanding, who face conflict or distance, and they say, "That won't happen to me." But that mindset is the exact reason it does happen, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, while you're busy believing you're untouchable. The truth is simple. Everything that destroys them can destroy you. Every blind spot, every unspoken truth, every unattended moment, every emotional withdrawal, all of it has the power to take root in your life if you don't stay awake to it. Relationships don't break because people are weak. They break because people become comfortable, and comfort is the enemy of awareness. When you say, "Not me," what you're really saying is, "I don't need to try as hard anymore." You lower your guard. You stop doing the small things that keep connection alive. You stop paying attention to the tone, the silence, the subtle shift in energy. You stop nurturing what needs maintenance. You assume the bond can carry itself. But nothing valuable carries itself. Everything strong gets stronger only through effort, consistent, intentional effort. The belief that trouble only happens to others kills your ability to grow. You start thinking you're above mistakes, above misunderstandings, above falling out of alignment. But alignment isn't permanent, it's maintained. Love isn't automatic, it's cultivated. Connection isn't guaranteed, it's protected. People who lose their relationships aren't always careless. Most of them simply thought they were safe. They thought their bond was too solid to crack. They believed the loyalty, the years, the memories would be enough to hold things together. But relationships don't survive on history, they survive on presence. And the illusion of immunity takes you out of the present faster than anything. You must fight this mindset because it blinds you to your own behavior. It makes you think your silence doesn't hurt, your dismissiveness doesn't matter. Your lack of communication isn't a big deal. Your partner will understand, your relationship will handle it, but every time you assume everything is fine, you're building the foundation for distance. Awareness is what keeps you sharp. It's what makes you notice when something feels different. It's what pushes you to check in instead of drifting. It's what helps you ask the hard questions before problems escalate. When you stay aware, you don't wait for breakdowns to act. You correct things in real time. Saying "not me" is a form of arrogance, not loud arrogance, quiet arrogance, the kind that comes packaged as confidence but is actually denial. The kind that convinces you that you're mature enough, loving enough, loyal enough, or strong enough to escape what everyone else faces. But real strength isn't thinking you're above failure. Real strength is knowing you aren't and staying committed to the work that prevents it. Every meaningful relationship requires humility, the humility to admit you can mess up, that you can overlook things, that you can fall into patterns that hurt the person you love, that you can drift if you're not paying attention. When you embrace that truth, you become more intentional, more present, more willing to put in the effort that keeps connection alive. You fight the mindset of "not me" by replacing it with "always me," always my responsibility, always my effort, always my awareness, always my willingness to show up. Not because everything is your fault, but because everything is your opportunity to protect, improve, and deepen the bond. The strongest relationships belong to people who never assume they're safe. They stay engaged, they stay curious, they stay conscious of the small shifts. They don't wait for something to break. They build every day like the foundation needs strengthening, because it does. When you fight the mindset of "it happens to them, not me," You rise into a higher level of ownership. You become someone who doesn't rely on luck or comfort, someone who understands that connection isn't guaranteed, it's earned, that love isn't maintained by autopilot, it's preserved through intention. The moment you think you're safe is the moment you stop protecting what matters. The moment you think you're different is the moment you stop doing the things that keep you different. Fight that mindset. Challenge it, replace it, because the relationship that lasts is the one you never take for granted. Healing and prevention come from being radically transparent. Not half honest, not polite honest, not honest only when it's comfortable. Radical transparency means you tell the truth that's hardest to speak, the truth you're scared might change the relationship, the truth that exposes your insecurities, flaws, fears, and needs. Because anything less than full transparency becomes a doorway for distance, misunderstanding, and resentment. People think honesty risks the relationship, but the real risk is hiding. Nothing corrodes connection faster than the truths we keep tucked away because we're afraid of how they'll land. When you're radically transparent, you give the relationship oxygen. You allow it to breathe, grow, and expand because nothing suffocates it in the shadows. Most relationships get wounded not by what happens, but by what never gets expressed. The emotions that get buried, the questions that never get asked, the feelings that were dismissed. Transparency prevents that. It pulls everything into the light where it can be understood, addressed, and healed before it becomes destructive. You heal when you say, "This is how this made me feel," instead of pretending it didn't bother you. You heal when you admit, "I'm scared of losing you," instead of acting unbothered. You heal when you share the truth about what you need instead of hoping the other person magically understands. You heal when you allow yourself to be fully seen, the messy parts too, instead of presenting a polished version of yourself. Transparency isn't weakness, it's strength. It requires courage to let someone see the raw, unfiltered version of you. It requires discipline to speak your truth even when your ego wants to stay silent. It requires maturity to bring things up early instead of letting them grow into something bigger. And it requires emotional clarity to communicate what you feel before it becomes something you regret. Most people avoid transparency because they fear conflict, they fear disappointment, they fear being misunderstood, but avoiding transparency doesn't protect you from those things, it guarantees them. Suppressed truth becomes emotional tension, hidden feelings grow into frustration, unspoken issues become silent battles. Radical transparency is the only way to disarm those emotional landmines before they explode. Transparency not only heals, it prevents damage in the first place. It creates alignment. When both people are honest about their expectations, boundaries, fears, and desires, there's no guessing game. There's no silent test, there's no hidden scoreboard. You know where you stand and where the other person stands, and that clarity eliminates confusion, which is where most relational problems begin. Imagine a relationship where every assumption is clarified when it shows up, where every shift in energy is talked about, not ignored, where every mistake is acknowledged without defensiveness, where every need is communicated without shame. That's how real connection grows. That's how trust deepens. That's how understanding strengthens. Transparency keeps you aligned, keeps you aware, and keeps you connected. But it requires you to drop the mask. To stop pretending everything is okay when it isn't, to stop trying to appear perfect, to stop hiding the uncomfortable parts of yourself. Transparency demands vulnerability, and vulnerability invites closeness. When you're honest about who you are and how you feel, you create a space where the other person can be honest too. You lead by example. You show them that truth is safe here. You show them that openness won't be punished but respected. Healing happens in that space, prevention happens in that space, level connection happens in that space, and understand this. Transparency doesn't mean dumping every thought that crosses your mind. It means telling the truth that matters, the truth that protects connection. It means you don't leave anything important unspoken. You don't hide emotions that affect the bond. You don't pretend to be fine when you're hurting. You don't avoid conversations just because they're uncomfortable. Discomfort today prevents destruction tomorrow. When people say, "We just grew apart," what they really mean is, we stopped being transparent, we stopped talking, we stopped revealing ourselves. Distance doesn't happen because two people change. It happens because they stop sharing their changes with each other. So if you want a relationship that heals from the past and stays strong in the future, you have to choose radical transparency. You have to commit to the truth even when your voice shakes. You have to open up even when your instinct is to close down. You have to speak what matters before silence speaks for you. Healing is truth. Prevention is truth. Connection is truth. Everything else is just the slow collapse of what could have been legacy relationships are built on relentless truth. Not selective truth, not convenient truth. Not truth that only shows up when emotions are calm and the moment is easy. Relentless truth, the kind that refuses to hide, refuses to avoid, refuses to let silence take the place of clarity. Because any relationship you want to last, any bond you want to build into something meaningful, something future-proof, something worthy of being called legacy, must be rooted in truth that does not bend or take days off. Truth is the foundation that holds two people together when life tests them. It's what keeps the connection steady when misunderstandings show up. It's what keeps love alive when emotions get messy. Without relentless truth, relationships become illusions pretty from a distance, fragile up close, and illusions always collapse under pressure. Legacy relationships aren't built on perfection, they're built on honesty. They're built on two people who are willing to tell the truth about who they are, what they feel, what they need, and where they stand, not to attack, not to blame, but to stay aligned. Alignment isn't automatic, it's maintained through truth. Without truth, alignment slips, and when alignment slips, distance begins. People underestimate how powerful truth is. They think truth causes conflict. They think truth creates tension, but truth doesn't break connection. Truth exposes what's already breaking. Truth illuminates the cracks so they can be repaired. Silence hides the cracks until they become too wide to fix. That's the difference. When you're relentless with truth, you're not waiting for problems to explode. You're addressing them when they're still whispering. You're not hiding your feelings until they turn into resentment. You're revealing them while they're still manageable. You're not pretending everything is fine just to keep the peace. You're choosing real peace over fake comfort. Legacy relationships require truth because legacy itself is built on consistency, and you can't be consistent if you're not honest. You can't build a future on half-truths. You can't build trust while hiding parts of yourself. You can't build connection while pretending. Truth is the glue. Truth is the anchor. Truth is the oxygen. Truth is also responsibility. It means owning your mistakes without excuses. It means admitting when you've been distant, when your tone was off, when your actions didn't match your intentions. Ownership builds trust faster than perfection ever will. When you tell the truth about your flaws, you show the other person that this relationship is a place where authenticity is allowed. And when authenticity is allowed, real connection follows. There's a different kind of strength in relationships built on relentless truth. They don't fall apart when challenges come. They don't shatter under pressure. They bend, they communicate, they adjust, they correct. They stay rooted because nothing is hidden, nothing is festering. Nothing is waiting to explode. Truth creates emotional safety. People think safety comes from avoiding conflict, but avoiding conflict only creates surface-level peace. True safety comes from knowing, I can tell you anything, I can bring you my fears, my doubts, my insecurities, and you won't run, you'll listen, you'll understand, you'll work with me. That safety is built through truth, practiced relentlessly. Legacy relationships are reserved for people who refuse to lie to themselves as much as they refuse to lie to each other. They don't hide behind ego. They don't pretend out of fear. They don't sacrifice honesty for temporary comfort. They understand that the moment you stop telling the truth is the moment you start weakening the bond. Truth also creates clarity. Clarity eliminates assumptions. Assumptions are the silent killers. Legacy relationships don't run on assumptions. They run on communication. They don't wait for the other person to guess how they feel. They articulate it. They don't hope the other person understands, they explain. They don't rely on emotional telepathy, they rely on truth. Relentless truth builds emotional intimacy. It opens the door to deeper connection, deeper understanding, deeper respect. You can't be deeply loved if you're not deeply known, and you can't be deeply known if you're not radically honest. If you want something temporary, keep hiding, keep pretending, keep avoiding the uncomfortable conversations. But if you want something that lasts, something that stands the test of time, something you can pass into the future with pride, then choose relentless truth. Truth in the small moments, truth when it's inconvenient, truth when your voice shakes, truth when your ego wants to stay quiet, truth even when the other person may not want to hear it, because legacy isn't built in the easy moments. It's built in the real ones. Legacy relationships stand because the truth stands inside them. Everything else fades, everything else breaks, but truth endures. And that's why anything built on truth lasts. So here's the challenge I leave you with. Go into your relationship, any important one, and ask, what is the one thing I'm not saying? What am I ignoring? Then say it, be the first, be raw, be real, because if you don't, the destroyer will live just beneath the surface in the quiet that you call all good. But if you do, if you pull the truth into the light, speak the thing that's been silenced, refuse to let ignorance whisper in your connection, then you will build something lasting, not just another moment, but a legacy bond. You were not made to drift. You were made to connect, to build, to stand. So let your voice matter, let your truth matter, and let your relationships reflect the power of someone who doesn't play small. Someone who refuses to let the invisible kill what really matters. Thank you. Go now, speak what matters, act what counts, build what lasts.